very interesting from a point of view that we are clearly gravitating away from the brick and mortar to something that is online. And then your brain quickly refigures itself to thinking, how do I measure metrics in that world? You have to recalibrate your standards a little bit. It's slightly challenging for me because insurance is still very traditional, right? So to bring in the work of founders, but then that's not a problem. I think one of the unifying features I've found is basically Gen Z and millennial founders. If you're a hustler, you're a hustler. Maybe a Gen Z millennial founder is just going to use social media much more effectively than I would.
By the end of this episode, you'll know where AI truly moves the needle in insurance, how data reframes risk, and why diverse teams and even storytelling are becoming core advantages, not side notes. Welcome back to the Enhance AI Partners podcast, the show where leaders scale in fast-changing industries through people, process, and pragmatic AI. I'm Johan Mejia, founder of Enhance AI Partners. We help fintech and SaaS teams scale smarter with AI-powered content, outbound systems, and workflow automation, so you grow faster without adding headcount. This show spotlights builders reimagining complex industries. In today's episode, we'll cover from quantum to insurance, how technologists reimagine risk. My guest is Renu Ann Joseph, technologist, founder, investor, and author whose work spans statistics to quantum computing, insurtech to venture. She's explored big questions like how AI and data reshape risk and why diversity of teams and technologies matters when you're modernizing a traditional industry. She also writes and podcasts to widen the conversation, an unusual, powerful combo for a technologist. We'll focus on insurance, AI, data, diversity, and we'll keep specifics about Renu's current companies off the table while diving in deep into frameworks and lessons. Renu, welcome. It is great to have you here.
Thank you, Johan. I'm very happy to be here.
So we'll go ahead and get started with the first segment. We're going to be looking at the technology lens on risk.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, you've worked from you've worked from statistics to quantum. How does that range shape you in how you think about risk and insurance and fintech today?
So my entire career has been built quite mindfully around data. I like data because it doesn't lie. There is no gray in data. That's the beauty about it. And I chose economics, which is a field that actually quantifies. Sometimes I feel the unquantifiable. So data is very important in that journey. In all the processes. So back when I did my PhD, data was actually an asset, still is an asset. And that's the view of data back then, because I worked under a professor who showed back then, early 2000s, that if you change the price of cigarettes, children will consume less. And because smoking was considered to be irrational. And he actually gave proof that if you change the prices with data, that kids will smoke less. And I kind of carried that work forward to India. So at that point, data is an asset, right? That's the view of data back then. Then I continued to quit that. I was in what is called health economics or tobacco economics for over 10 years. And I moved into financial forecasting, where I worked for Moody's Analytics and I built forecasting models for states and governments. There again, data is an asset. And that was because you're using whatever public data at that point is available to forecast how counties, states, and countries do their business. It's an input into decision. Then I joined Swiss Re, and since then, I must say I have had a different view of data, both as an asset and actually a risk generator. So that approach is now highly intensified in the age of data, of AI, right? Because AI has challenges in that the models have to be explainable. And what you explain it on, you explain it on the underlying data. So now the way and obviously you have GDPR, you have HIPAA, all of them have become very important. And for those who don't know GDPR is the rule for EU that kind of tracks how you document the data that comes to you and what can be used versus not. HIPAA is something specifically for the healthcare system in the US. So these rules have become very important and overarching in the last, I would say, 15 years. So data, in addition to being an asset, is now, if you don't use it correctly, is a liability. It's become something that insurers are looking into with an additional lens.
And was there a specific moment that made you realize that insurance and AI together were a once-in-a-generation opportunity?
I think that, when I launched Luminant back in 2018, my goal was that it would at one point be a platform that would exchange data between autonomous trucks and insurance companies. That was the goal. At that point, I knew it was far ahead of time because the problems of the insurance industry are, and still to some extent, quite Excel-based. And so I think that that was quite ahead, so I didn't worry about it AI back then. But in the last 7 years, I've seen how everything now is AI. So I'm actually seeing I wouldn't say it's not evolution anymore. It's like disrupting the way insurers think about things. So the last 2-3 years, I would say ChatGPT has been such a major contributor to the way insurance is and is forced to adopt AI.
And if you had to put your mission in one line today, and that could be your personal mission as well, it doesn't have to be any company-related mission, what would that be?
Recalibrating the world with the immeasurable power of data.
That really paints the picture. And you see, once we and you see risk differently, the next question is where AI is actually useful. So insurance has always been data-driven. Where do you see AI moving the needle most in this industry specifically?
I think that there are the core operations of an insurance company. That means that you develop the product, you price the product, you deploy the product or distribute the product. That's the core. And then there's a loss that comes in, and then there's a payout. That's what an insurer does in a sense. And anywhere in there where there is a process that is manual, but has moved from paper to digital, that's where AI is going to hit, right? Because if you are still in the paper space, that was the case till about COVID, then AI can't do anything because AI cannot do anything on paper. You have to work with something that's digital, right? So anywhere in there, I think I constantly see startups who are finding pain points and who are automating that. Sometimes even AI is not needed, but that is the low-hanging fruit. Then there's a part of the insurance value chain, which is you look for a new risk. You assess whether that risk should be actually insured. And if so, what kind of insurance should be provided. There you have a blend of AI and just subject matter knowledge. And I think that area is still evolving because just because you have 100 data sets, it doesn't mean that you have a good storyline coming out of it. You need to know
100%.
what you're doing in the operation space to go back to the kind of the preceding space. So that is, at one point, it will be AI, but there is a lot of people intelligence in there. In the operation space, I'm not saying there's not people intelligence, but there is much more scope there to be automated.
I see. And what would you say is one area where AI is overrated in insurance and data management?
I have a pet peeve, which is basically data labeling. It's a very particular, because, when you go into a data set and you label it, and you further label it, you have to know what you're doing, right? So so if a very simple thing is, you see you're going to label age groups and in the data set. You put it 0 to 10, 10 to 20, whatever. You need to know why you're labeling it that way. Why are you doing it in tranches of 10 versus 20? And that goes back to one, the discipline itself of insurance or the problem you're particularly trying to solve, and potentially what else you are using those age groups to do stuff with. So people love giving me data labeling AI. I'm like, that's just nonsense put on nonsense if you don't know what you're doing. But that's my pet peeve, possibly because I spent a lot of time doing these things before, early in my career. And also anything around clusters and classifications, just you have to use your business sense to know what you're doing. That cannot be just AI'd out. Eventually, yes, but not now.
So would you say that's part of the risk when using AI
Yep.
and data insurance? And how do you balance automation with the human judgment, underwriting that still needs?
Yes, I think that you still need your underwriters, and the role of an underwriter. So there are specific risks, specific line in insurance where there isn't still enough data. The role of the underwriter there is much more to look back into the historic, into the precedents, and then say, this is how this was insured or priced versus not. So in those kind of risks, an underwriter is still very important. In the more common risks, an underwriter is still important, but you don't need as much of a human touch. And then there are some risks like parametric, where the loss is paid out immediately when it's triggered, that you just set it up better. So depending on the specific line of insurance, the role of the underwriter is still there, but it is on varying degrees.
And if there was a first-time founder that asked you where to apply AI first and where to hold back, what do you think your playbook would be?
I mean, I would do the very traditional playbook of what is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the problem you're trying to solve, right? And that is, you need to really state clearly, because I've seen a lot of tech founders come and say, I'm building this, so I'm going to do it to insurance. I'm like, that's quite assumptive, right? Because first, there are questions of that. Is that a problem that you think insurance wants to solve? Now, as the question is nuanced, because I'm running after a problem which insurers should solve and they haven't. So that's a little bit of but AI is not the answer to that. There are other things that are the answer to that. So is this something that insurance wants to solve? At least you should have an assessment of that. And then if that is, you think is the case, why do you think it should be AI? Right? What is the current solution that is now? Because if it's right now manual, AI may not be the solution.
100%.
And third, if AI is going to solve this, you think your customer will pay additional for the AI? So these are the three questions that, as a founder, I think you need to ask that for most industries.
Yeah, it totally makes
Maybe in
sense.
some industries, the question isn't valid anymore. Maybe it's a different version of the question. But for some regulated industries and slow-moving industries like pharmaceuticals, biotech, insurance, banking, yes.
Interesting. And now that we've talked about AI and, what's good, what's risky still, let's go to people building systems and the teams themselves. So you've written and spoken about diversity, both of thought and of teams. Why is this especially critical in insurance, fintech, data management?
So if I take off one component of diversity, let's just say that it's gender, and diversity has different components. Around a half percentage of the world is men and women, right? And so if you think about an insurance product, most of the people, at least in the traditional insurance world, are men, have been men. So if you think about it, it's men making products for women. So that just doesn't work. For different reasons, we have been made differently, and we should celebrate that. So just from even launching a product, you need to understand that particular gender perspective. And I would extend that to any form of diversity. So when you build a product for a particular segment, it is always helpful to have that gender being represented there. Otherwise, it's just, I am not in a man's shoes. So how do I know what shoe a man wants to buy? Why would I be the person? Obviously, there are, differences to that. Like, you can understand consumers, you have a background in data, but you have to be able to ask the users. So it actually comes down to balancing your user experience correctly. That's where diversity is very important.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And could you share a story where a more diverse perspective led to a better outcome or a better product?
I think that probably when I worked in Swiss Re, the team that I was very intentionally diverse. I don't think I've ever found a team where they really picked people who were very, very different. And I think that was just because we didn't understand reinsurance. No one understands reinsurance. It's a very niche industry. So we came in with our open minds from different parts of the world, different industries, and we asked the questions, the stupid, the really illogical questions. But I think that's, at the end of the day, that's came up with some really good data products that helped that company.
Oh. And what have you learned from Gen Z and millennial founders that maybe older players might be missing?
I have learned that they use social media in a way that I don't, because in their DNA, social media is more deeply entwined than in mine. So they just use it differently. And I think there are learnings from the way they use media for their business that I can take away for my business. I do that consistently. I always talk to them. Sometimes it's interesting, sometimes when they make apps, they don't think about LinkedIn. It's all on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever that is.
100%.
So it's very interesting from a point of view that we are clearly gravitating away from the brick and mortar to something that is online. And then your brain quickly refigures itself to thinking, how do I measure metrics in that world? You have to recalibrate your standards a little bit. It's slightly challenging for me because insurance is still very traditional, right? So to bring in the work of founders, but then that's not a problem. I think one of the unifying features I've found is basically Gen Z and millennial founders. If you're a hustler, you're a hustler. Maybe a Gen Z millennial founder is just going to use social media much more effectively than I would.
Yeah, I still have trouble using social media for business purposes. But I think, like you mentioned, especially for insurance, that it's not the most hot topic that people want to see on social media. So I see where you might have having troubles there. And beyond building teams, you've also chosen to write books and host podcasts. So most technologists don't write books or host podcasts. Why did you decide to do it?
I wanted to position my messaging very carefully. In today's world of social media, if you Google anyone's name, you see things, right? Just depends on what the media picks up. So whenever I've done a podcast or a book, I made sure that the SEO is good on that, so that when you Google me, that may be the first thing that you pick up. And my podcast and my books are very intentional. The first podcast was on diversity and innovation. That is a topic that is dear to my heart, and I explain why. The second one is on the global tech entrepreneur. It's called Innovation Odyssey. It looks at entrepreneurs like me who have lived and worked in different countries and built businesses in different places. So I want to make sure that when you Google me, you see something that reflects my personality. I think that's very important because it is very easy to lose yourself out there. And I know who I am and what I want to do, and I want to put that same intention into my social media footprint.
I think that's very powerful, and I think some of our listeners will start doing that, including myself. I think it's a really good way to position yourself in how I want to position myself in because there's not much control in how I show up on Google. but I can make sure that what shows up is good, good material. I really like that. And what role does storytelling play in advancing innovation in insurance and fintech?
I think so. In anything, actually, in any aspect of your life, storytelling is so powerful. It can be something as insignificant as, say, grounding a child. You don't say, you could, I do this because I'm your mom or whatever, right? But you don't. You create a reason for that. Now, I'm not being flippant, but for the insurance industry, it is an industry which has been forced to change. There are benefits for them being where they are now. The capital in the industry is enough for it to stay where it is. But that's not going to be the case 10 years later. You have to push the industry. You have to really push the industry to change against these forces. And for that, just a storytelling is one tool, right? At the end of the day, it's always the financials that make sense. I mean, I am even not going to be blind about that. But storytelling is a tool to get them to meet most of the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it is what convinces. So if you're an entrepreneur in the insurance space and you don't have a tie to the insurance space, how on earth do you make them think that you are relevant? So you always have to say either this is my tie to insurance. This is what I want to see done better. It can be a personal story, or it can be a story that comes from your work in insurance that says, this is my problem that I found. This is what I want to fix because this impacts the financials. So as much as you don't want to agree to that, it always has to come back to the financials. And a story that links to financials is the most powerful story in the world.
That's 100% right. And one of our previous guests, he has a VC. So one of the problems that he saw in most of the startups and founders was the lack of a storytelling.
Yes.
Product was great. The founders were great. The team was awesome, but there was no storytelling behind the why on the product. And, there's 10, 20, hundreds maybe of companies that are similar to yours, but how do you make yours stand out, by a unique storytelling? So I think that's a very, very important part of life in general. I don't think it's only in business. I think it's personal as well. And what lessons have you learned from writing and interviewing that you now apply as a technologist?
From writing?
Writing and interviewing or hosting podcasts.
I have learned that you get the best interview if you're talking on a podcast. You get the best interview when the person that you're talking to is at his or her best.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to really work on that. Even though the reason the reason I wrote or do a podcast is actually to position my messaging. These podcasts and these books are actually about them too, right? It's their story.
100%. I'm
giving it wings when maybe it didn't have wings when it's early on. So if it's their story, you have to work with them at their best. And I've had great examples of founders postponing their podcast because the product was not done. And I would always say, let's record when you are ready because this is your story. And this, I think 100%. It really goes back to the user experience. That is first. That is what I've always believed. And whatever I do in insurance is because I think I always keep the insured first in everything I do. Whether it's starting a company, whether it's an analytics platform, it is really how do I serve the insured better? Because insurance has really a bad rap. And so if you're going to change it, no one's going to, as you said, no one's going to wake up today and say, my God, I want to buy insurance. But I want them to not sigh when they think about insurance. That's my goal.
That's very powerful. And I think with what you're doing so far, you'll get there.
Thank you.
So let's zoom out and now look at the future outlook. So looking 3 to 5 years ahead, how do you see AI and data reshaping insurance and risk management?
I think that 5 years later, there will be lesser data silos because that's a problem in insurance. It will still, the world of Excels will still exist. That's not that quickly going away, but it will become consistently lesser. And when that becomes lesser, AI will be more powerful, more widely used. Hopefully by then we will have some accepted standards of models for many, many things. We would have AI governance structures in place that would be uniform across the world, because that's what we are now lacking. And I think it's a little bit of a wild world out there. So I hope the wildness would have calmed down a little bit for the benefit of humanity. So progress, I can't anticipate the pace, because what we've seen in the last 2 years has been tremendous, but it takes a lot to keep that pace at that rate going. So there's going to be progress, pace undetermined, hopefully a more, I don't like using the word governed because I'm an entrepreneur, but a more explainable world.
And what's one principle that you'd give a first-time founder about data and risk?
About data and risk?
Yeah.
For data, dig in deep. There is never enough that you can do. Those rabbit holes that you usually are not asked to go down, please go down those paths in data, because it's the basis of everything. And for risk, it is everything is changing and by the minute. So what you know yesterday of risk, be prepared to reevaluate that today.
And I think that applies to almost everything in AI, like
Yes.
you mentioned. It's
Right.
progressing so far. What we know in ChatGPT today might not be the same tomorrow.
No.
And where's, that edge case, that scenario where you think current models will fail soon, or, failing currently?
In AI?
That could be in AI, data management, insurance, all three.
That's a tricky question. I think that, okay, let me say a blind spot that we haven't solved yet is AI governance, especially for the insurance industry, and they are early on in that. And then, you have a policy that's denied by an AI bot, and the states have very strict rules about what policies get denied. Those can be a problem. Then we are in the world of agentic AI. That's agents running the world. That has its incredible risks and possibilities. We're still early on researching that. And so those are blind spots, I think, that we need to work on.
Beautiful. And that's a perfect setup for us to go to the quick fire round. So do 4 questions. And we'll start with the first one. Most overrated buzzword in insurance and AI right now.
Agentic
It's a
AI.
2-part question. 100%. I think especially if you go through LinkedIn,
Yes.
you'll see a bunch of those. And what's the most underrated lever for improving risk management?
Data.
And one thing insurance companies should stop doing today.
I have so many pet peeves. Let me. I actually think there's a movement in the insurance industry of letting go of the older workforce for different reasons. I think that is dangerous because, as I said, across the lines of business, there is a lot of wisdom in different lines.
100%.
Not everyone is the same, and you need to think about your workforce very, very, very carefully and balance it with the fact that there are not so many younger people into the insurance workforce. You're going to have a shortage. So you don't want a fill in there which is temporary, which is not thought through. So the way it treats its workforce, I think that's what I would ask them to look at it with more caution.
And I'll rephrase this question, but we'll do it. One book, podcast from that you've created that you'd recommend to first-time founders or anyone trying to grow their business. And then the second part of the question, just a more general book and podcast that you would pick or recommend.
So I actually I like Harry Stebbings' podcast just because he's, he became a VC from becoming a podcast. And I think he has some interesting thoughts. He has some good founders out there. I like that. And then a book that I love has been actually, it's philosophy. It's The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. He is a German philosopher. For many people who are overthinkers or who dwell in the past or the future, this is an absolutely great book to stay in the present and to really live in the present. And I think this is something that both an entrepreneur or a non-entrepreneur can enjoy. There was one that I like, which is, I think it's called Negotiating the Difference. I think that's one. But like I don't read entrepreneurial books a lot. I read philosophy, sociology, religion, because being an entrepreneur is one kind of a person. You have the corporate
100%.
person, you have the non-traditional roles, but what defines us more are people. So I actually look at a lot of these books to kind of understand human behavior more. And for the non-business podcast, like surprisingly, I'm actually not a podcast listener. So I don't have
Oh, really?
recommendation. It's just very, I prefer to like read way more than I listen to podcast, TV, or movies. That's my preference. So I'm sorry about that. But I've also noticed I personally like podcasts that are 10 minutes per episode.
Yeah, those ones are hard to find.
Yes.
But
Yes.
if I could recommend
But
one
of course, I have to
podcast.
do a shameless plug for mine. So
And from your side, what would you recommend to the listeners to go and either read or listen from what you've done so far?
so I actually think that from my both podcasts, they touch on different topics. It's like I have so many interesting people on there. I really like. I have one of the last episodes I had was on lucid dreaming. It's a founder based in New York City. Lucid dreaming is a very powerful tool, as I learned after that. That's just interesting from a mental health perspective. And because I've been in quantum, my first or second episode was on quantum computing, and that's a nice introduction to that. It's also something on space. So as you can see, my favorite podcasts have nothing to do with data or quantum computing is related, but it's more technology. And the other mental health, the esoteric part.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And so we're done with the quick fire round, and we'll go through the summary. So, two of the big takeaways that stood out from this conversation are one, AI and data are reframing risk. So, the winners in this space will be precise about where automation adds value and where human judgment remains the moat. And then, second point, diversity and storytelling are force multipliers. They surface blind spots, improve products, speed up adoption in conservative industries. Your lens from quantum to insurance to authorship shows how technologies can widen the aperture of build smart systems. So, Renu, for listeners who want to follow your work, what's the best place to connect with you personally and stay updated on your writing and podcasts?
It would be LinkedIn. You can see me on LinkedIn. I also have a blog on Medium that I write. But LinkedIn is really the best way to get to me. Fortunately, unfortunately, I'm on it too much.
So we'll make sure to link in LinkedIn and Medium below on the show notes so everyone can get to that. And Renu, we appreciate your time. This was a fantastic conversation. We thank you for your clarity on insurance, AI, data, teams, and why stories matter. To our audience, if this helped, or if you like the podcast, subscribe and share it with one colleague who's building in insurance or fintech, and drop your biggest AI insurance blocker in the comments, and we'll compile top solutions in a future episode. I'm Johan Mejia. This is the Enhance AI Partners podcast. See you next time.
Thank you very much, Johan.